Hello and welcome to Engineering Thoughts, where engineering minds come together to discuss topics of interest and relevance to our industry. I'm Vanessa Seeley-Fisher, and today I'm joined by Peter Clark. Peter is the Director and CEO of Challenge Air and an airline pilot and training captain for FlySafair. Peter has over 40 years of hands-on experience in the aeronautical industry, and his expertise extends from design and aircraft management to flying the huge Boeing 747s. Welcome, Peter. We're delighted to have you join us today.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Before we delve into the concepts of engineering and the art of flying, I'd like to start at your beginning. Would you like to share a bit of your journey into engineering and what sparked the interest?
I think it starts at a young age. You either know you're going to be a pilot or an engineer or you don't.
Okay.
And everything aeroplanes becomes part of your life. You know that you want to do that. And you look at ways to channel the life to get there. The subjects you take at school are directed towards that. And eventually you map out a path that you'll follow. And it's interesting to see how it comes together as you start.
So did you start off by flying or did you start off at university?
I actually didn't. I started straight after school. I went to South African Airways to become a technician. And that was the advice that was given to me by my mother. And she felt that I was more practically minded than engineering grade at the university. What happened eventually is I went to university to do aeronautical engineering, but it started with a technical background, which was hugely helpful. With a technical background, you can now apply that technical knowledge when you do the engineering, which makes it far more sensible.
And you can see what the point is in learning the various theoretical subjects that you're learning because you've seen the other side.
Definitely. So
Brilliant.
By the time I got to university, I'd already finished my pilot's license, a commercial license, and an instructor's rating.
Okay.
And I had the technical background. It was massively helpful.
I can imagine. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later. But being within the flying industry, I'm sure, like me, most people will assume that this has been a career that's helped you see the world. So have you?
To an extent, yes. Mostly around Southern Africa. For family reasons, I decided to stay on the domestic routes.
Right.
And that led me to flying around Southern Africa. When I say that, mostly no further than north than the equator. But flying on the 747 took us into Europe and various parts of the world. So yeah, I have seen a few parts of the world and it's been very interesting.
That's great. Now, in addition to being a pilot within an aeroplane, you also own your own business. And as a small business owner, what types of aeronautical design are you involved in? Surely you're not designing aeroplanes?
No, we don't design aeroplanes. We design changes or modifications to aeroplanes and helicopters. So we do a lot of work and we have a scope that takes us from the smallest airplanes to the biggest. So we modify airplanes from small helicopters, Robinson 22s, all the way up to we have modifications valid on 747s, 737s, Airbus, the whole fleet of aircraft, a lot of big helicopters, small helicopters. So the design changes is small bespoke changes to those airplanes that are required, camera pods and things like that.
Right, I was going to say, in what regard would those changes be associated? Not with the actual operation of the flying machine?
Sometimes, yes. Some of the modifications we do require test flying. But on the avionics or electronics side, we will change equipment in the airplane. If you want to upgrade your radio suite or put glass cockpits in the aircraft, you take out the old instruments, you put the glass cockpit in. That's the kind of modification we would do. We've changed engines on airplanes. So we've taken out a small engine and put a big engine in it, make it go faster. We've changed aerodynamics. We've put camera pods on. We do brackets for something as simple as an iPad needs a special bracket. You can't just put a bracket in an airplane. So we design the bracket, we manufacture it, and then we put it in.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I suppose it's such a niche and high safety risk sector that you do need to take those things into consideration. Not like in your car, just making a little modification.
Definitely.
Wow. Now, looking at what you've encompassed over your career, has there been a particular project that really completely changed the way you think as an engineer?
I would say the engineering projects that have led me to make changes have been driven by the owners of the aircraft.
Right.
I have a policy of I never say no to anything. And there's been a few projects that have required me to apply my mind differently in engineering. If I think of one in particular, For example, changing that engine from a small engine to a bigger one. People come to you and say, we have a problem with this old aeroplane, how do we change it? And it requires you to think outside the box of how you're going to achieve that, because it involves power changes, aerodynamic changes, and the scope of engineering changes with that. So had I done it before? No, I hadn't. Did I learn how to do it? Yes, I did. And that's what I found about engineering, is everything you do in aeronautical engineering requires you to adapt to what it is you've been asked to do by the owners.
Yes.
And that's the biggest change for me, is how do you adapt to what your owners want?
Now, when I think of most students studying aeronautical engineering, I'm going to make a very unknowledgeable guess that the majority of them are probably not flying airplanes in their personal capacity. Do you think that being a pilot influenced how you saw the engineering, and do you think it is a benefit for a pilot to be an engineer?
Absolutely, in both senses and both directions. An engineer who is a pilot understands what he's doing. You can see the passion in the engineer who is also a pilot, in that he has come through being a pilot. You don't just do that. You actually have to work hard to become a pilot. But if you've been a pilot and you now become an engineer, the way you adapt your projects is more likely to be successful, because you know the outcome of what you're trying to achieve first.
Yes.
In the other sense, a pilot who's also an engineer, I hold a Class 2 test pilot rating, which allows me to test aeroplanes in various configurations, and we do a lot of testing at FlySafair, for example. And if you understand the engineering behind it, you can talk to the engineers who've put that airplane together for you in a meaningful way. You can actually go through problems with the airplane and analyze them together with the ground crew, the engineers.
Yes.
That's where the biggest benefit is you're talking the same language.
And I imagine it makes your experience a lot richer.
Definitely.
Now, moving away from your personal experience, but looking at the industry, what, Peter, would you say are some of the challenges that are facing aeronautical engineers today?
The biggest challenge facing aeronautical engineers today is you have two sides of it. There's a global challenge and there's a local challenge. I'll start with the global challenge. Is our industry is almost at the point where it is at the pinnacle of what it knows now. The next generation of aeronautics is going to be in supersonics and hypersonics, which in changing the engines that we use. We're going to use ramjets, scramjets. Engines that conventionally used now will not work in those machines. So we are getting to the limits of what we can do with the current technology. And that's the biggest challenge facing engineers today. How do you move that paradigm shift to the new realm, to go Mach 5, Mach 12? Those are big numbers, but the engineers have to understand that you need the drawback is the technology and the equipment that is supplied to us. The materials isn't there yet. So you can design a supersonic airplane, but you don't have an engine for it. That's the biggest international pitfall at the moment.
Right.
Locally, we have a big problem in aeronautics, is that our aeronautical engineering is shrinking. Most of our graduates are going overseas. Many of them are finding work overseas because they can't work here. There are very few companies. Challenge Air, my company, has been around for 30 years. It's a milestone for us. Next year will be 30 years.
Congratulations.
But the challenge is, where do you get engineers from? And the engineers who are at our regulators are straight out of school graduates who are not pilots, who don't fly, who have no interest in aviation other than the degree. And that's a challenge, because the industry is frustrated. It takes too long to do things. So people are deregistering airplanes and moving them overseas. Our industry and our aviation community is shrinking at a vast rate, which makes it unsustainable.
Yes, that's very sad and quite challenging. Well, I did ask you what the biggest challenges are, and I think you've addressed that with quite some sobering thoughts. And moving to something perhaps in some ways aligned, and that is AI. What are the influences and potential difficulties you see with AI and its role in aviation going into the future?
I'm not an expert on AI by any means, but I have seen influence of AI already, particularly in the last few months. And I found AI to be a risk for us from the perspective that AI is now introducing a non-human solution to the problems that we are facing. So the engineers who are resorting to AI don't understand the problem, but they will take an AI solution and apply it to the problem without that understanding. They don't know themselves how it gets to the answer. And as an aeronautical engineer, that's a problem. If you're putting your signature on a piece of paper and this thing gets airborne and you're flying at 35 or 38,000 feet and it blows apart and you don't know why it blew apart, that's a big risk. And that's something our modern engineers have to adapt to. The other side of AI that is a huge problem is reporting on accidents and various things in aviation. We've recently had a very tragic event involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The number of reports that I've received in the last week of AI origin that are completely false and damaging is incredible. They look perfectly credible, but they're not. And in aeronautics, when people are involved in those machines, you don't go there. So we need to have some form of oversight of AI, because it's damaging our industry, and some graduates are trying to use AI to pass. Yes. And I've seen that.
Yes, well, let's hope we don't get the robots flying the aeroplanes, because that could also be a challenge.
True.
Peter, bringing a conversation a little bit back to yourself, have there been any standout moments or highlights in your career that you say, for this I'm glad I've lived?
It's difficult to say or to pick one. There are so many highlights in the industry. Flying helicopters, flying aeroplanes, they're all wonderful things. We say if you can't fly aeroplanes, you have to go to work. So I think one of the highlights of my career was actually test flying an aircraft that required a camera pod to be fitted to it, taking it to its limits, putting the aircraft through the paces, and then seeing the pod that you've designed actually being approved.
Oh, wonderful.
It's a wonderful thought, and you think this thing has been designed by us. We did it.
That's great.
It's great. And you land the airplane finally, and you sign it over to the general public to use it.
That's wonderful.
It's great.
Just before we draw this completely to a close, every time I think of a pilot, I confess I think about airplanes, but you've just mentioned flying helicopters. Is that a different license altogether, or do you qualify as a airplane pilot and a helicopter pilot, or does the one encompass the other, or because they look completely different to my very untrained eye?
They are quite different, and you need different licenses.
Okay.
Completely separate licenses. You can use a lot of your experience. If I may use the example of the Air Force, a lot of the airline pilots today used to be helicopter pilots in the Air Force.
Okay.
But they all started on a fixed-wing aeroplane. Afterwards, they get dispatched to different disciplines of flying. Some went to helicopters, some go to fighters, some go to transports. But ultimately, they come back to the airline. And the airline, as long as you have the right license, will quite happily take you in, even though you were a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
And helicopter pilots make good fixed-wing pilots too.
Just as we close off, Peter, I'd love to hear your advice that you would give to a young engineer who's looking to enter the field of aviation.
Perhaps the biggest for me in terms of advice is don't go into this industry if you're doing it for the money or you're doing it for glamour. You go into the industry because you want to improve it and you have a passion for aviation. If you don't have a passion for aviation and you see it as a path to some form of glory, stay away.
Oh, interesting.
Work hard, do your maths at school. It's going to be tough,
Yes.
but it is a very, very rewarding industry. Hugely rewarding.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. It has been such an interesting discussion. Thank you for sharing with us and taking time out of your day to talk with us and for fitting us in between your flights. I do appreciate that. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of our Engineering Thoughts series. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to ensure that you don't miss another video. We'll see you next time, and until then, stay curious.